to Life, Love, and Therapy with Jumi Olawale. Today I have an amazing person. She's a very amazing friend of mine, and her name is Kanyin. And I can't wait for her to introduce herself to you and for you to hear what she's going to share with us. Today, the topic of conversation is what it's like to be a single woman in your 30s. So, Kanyin, please introduce yourself.
Sure. As Jimmy said, my name is Kanyin Olubuyide, and I am a 34-year-old woman who was born and raised in Nigeria and moved to the US when I was 18.
You were born and raised in Nigeria, and then you moved to the US when you were 18. So there's going to be some cultural stuff going on here. Can I say that? Is that fair?
Sure, absolutely.
How do you feel about being single?
I would say that it's probably a mixed bag. Some days I'm completely comfortable with being single, and other days I get lonely and wish I was not single.
Have you always felt this way about being single?
No, I have not always felt this way about being single. There has been an evolution to get to this point. I think when graduated college and mingling with other friends, and then everyone started dropping like flies into the marital pool. Here I am still standing solo, standing single. There were times where I wondered if something was wrong with me, and it really bothered me for a long time. I think probably up until I turned 30, actually. I had a lot of concerns, and I didn't realize until, like I said, probably when I was about 30, that there are other measures of happiness that don't involve being in a long-term relationship with.
Please unpack that.
In unpacking that, there's a cultural element to it. Being born in Nigeria, anyone who's from Nigeria, you could probably identify with this, that there's kind of a path that has been set for you from birth up until your adulthood. You spend all of your time in your early years, formative years, and focus on your education. You go to college, you get that degree, and then you marry. If you're a woman, you marry a man, and you work on becoming a mother. And that's kind of the highlight of your adulthood, is that day when you get married and then when you become a mother. So I think for me, that was kind of what I was socialized with. And so when I got to a certain age and, I'm like, well, so far I've done well with education, I've done well with everything else. Why can't I accomplish this next step? And I kept feeling like I was stuck,
What do you think about the messaging that we send to young girls about the idea of getting married that you wish wasn't passed on to them?
That's a very good question. If I could change something about how we socialize young women, it would probably be to let them know that they can be a complete person without being a married person.
Ooh. What do you think about the stigma that is very prevalent for women who are not married, especially once they hit 30?
It can be very challenging, but I think it always comes down to you as an individual and what you allow to control your mindset about yourself. I'm very fortunate that I come from a family that's not super hung up on me getting married.
Yeah.
It's not that they don't want it for me. It's not that they don't pray for it. In fact, I believe that as we speak right now, my mom is probably on her knees saying a prayer for me to get married soon. But my parents have come to appreciate who I am as an individual and have come to be thankful for the things that I, have done and the things that I am doing. Given that, you kind of have to reaffirm yourself, and sometimes it's a daily basis, sometimes it's multiple times a day. You kind of have to reground yourself in, what, I'm a complete human being, and I'm a successful human being, and being married is not going to determine or define how I let people see me, how I let people perceive me. I'm not going to be weighed down by other people's expectations of where I should be with this particular status in my life.
Yeah.
So the stigma will always be there. And as is any kind of stigma, it's other people's perception of an expectation or a condition. And you kind of have to determine how much you're going to let that play into you as as a person,
Yeah, it sounds like a major internal job.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me, like, some of the experiences of the things that people have said to you. At least I know that within the Nigerian circle, I can say that Nigerians are very highly opinionated people. And sometimes they're just beyond highly opinionated, they lack boundaries. And I also think that within our culture, one of the most disrespected groups are single women.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like Nigerians can be so rude and so harsh, and they have opinions that you don't ask them. So tell me some of the stuff that you have heard, not just within the Nigerian circle,
Mm-hmm.
but other crazy things that people have felt like they could just say to you because you're single.
Well, I won't get too crass on your show. Opinions are like a certain body part. Everyone has one, right? When I was 27, I think it was, I decided that I was going to buy myself a place. And lo and behold, many people had opinions about that.
When you say buy yourself a place, you mean buy your own house?
Yes, buy a house. Many people had opinions, and many people felt that I was jumping the gun and that I was putting the cart before the horse, and that this was a step I was supposed to take with my husband. And now, if I bought this house, what signal does that send to any willing, available men, who would be interested in me?
Crazy.
Very crazy.
What were you supposed to do? Like,
live in an apartment. Doesn't that seem logical?
Do you think like that would be expected of a man? Like if a single man decides like at the age of 27 that he wants to buy a house, do you think that they will receive they'll get the same response?
It's ironic because if a girl took a 27-year-old man who lived in an apartment home and said, I want to marry this man, there is a high probability that people would tell her, you sure you want to marry that guy? He doesn't even live in his own house.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's interesting that on the one hand, a girl is not, quote unquote, allowed to buy her own house. But then the flip side is the opposite for men, where it's more the expectation and it's more a measure of success.
Yeah. So it's a different type of pressure.
It is a different type of pressure.
But I'm glad you bought the house.
I'm glad I bought the house too. It's brought me a lot of, joy and pleasure and wonderful memories.
Yeah. What are some of the craziest things that you've heard or assumptions that are made about single women?
My favorite, not so favorite assumption is the one where people think that you are out to steal their husband because you are a somewhat attractive, somewhat intelligent, somewhat successful woman. So people feel a need to be extra protective of their spouses around you.
A seductress.
Oh yeah, temptress.
You shared earlier that you have to do a lot of your own internal work. Do you feel like you get the type of men that match your lifestyle, your success, and your resume?
I would say that in the past probably 10 years of dating, I can count, in one hand, the number of men that I've matched with that I felt were comparable to me in terms of socioeconomic status, lifestyle, mindset, belief set, and success. Unfortunately, what I find that tends to happen is you having to make a decision on what you want to compromise on. I say compromise as opposed to settling because I think there's a distinction there where settling is, that this is something that you don't ever want to bend on, but in the names of becoming paired up with someone, you decide to sacrifice it anyways and think like, this is for the greater good. I'll sacrifice this one thing and then I'll get a husband and family out of it. Whereas with a compromise, it's just, maybe you're going from saying, maybe I wanted to be with someone who makes more money than me, but now I have to be with someone who makes the same amount of money as me or a little less than me, and maybe they have potential and be comfortable with that. Yeah. So it's just kind of like trade-offs that we're not on your original list of what you wanted, but things that you're comfortable with shifting on.
If you're a woman that's successful and you're able to take care of yourself and you're able to buy your own house and you're able to buy your own car, maybe your expectation in terms of what you want in a marriage might not be what is traditionally seen as what people should take or accept in a marriage.
Right. You're absolutely right about that. At this point that I've gotten to in my career age, maybe my thing is I want someone who I can take really nice vacations with, right? As opposed to being worried about someone who, is going to bring home money so we have food on the table.
Yes.
So it does come into play, I find, with my dating, where I kind of have to adjust my mindset a little bit. So maybe this person is not the person who will surprise me on a trip to Tahiti, but maybe it's someone who, like, we can go to Florida, and there's nothing wrong with Florida.
So do you feel like when it comes to relationships, again, the whole idea that women have to work on themselves, and we've been groomed a certain way to prepare ourselves for marriage, but then as you do this internal work and you take care of yourself and you grow, you become more successful, do you feel like when the men have not been taught differently, that they think that when they get married, their role is to take care of their wives, their role is to provide for the family, but you're able to do all of that for yourself. And maybe what you want is somebody that can also match you in terms of emotional intelligence.
Right.
And that person doesn't have it.
Oh man, that is like probably 90% of my dating experiences. Sometimes I feel like a therapist on the first few dates I go on with some guys, because they start talking to me about some problem that they're experiencing. And then it's me sitting there like, well, that sounds to me like maybe you need to insert a boundary there. Maybe your family, is expecting too much of you and you need to have a conversation. I tend to find that a lot of the men I date, even if they're like a couple years older than me or within the same age group, that they're not as emotionally mature as I am. And it's not to say that I'm like an exceptionally mature person. I find that oftentimes that's not the case with, our male friends.
Yes.
And I think part of it too is the value that has been placed on getting into a relationship for men is about providing financially. Therefore, there was never really a need to do all of that emotional work. But I think what in today's day and age, especially, that emotional work is what comes into play when you start talking about conflict and conflict resolution. And I think what a lot of people don't realize about conflict is it's an opportunity to grow. It's an opportunity to actually become more intimate, and like that friction, creates a new dynamic, a new, depth of intimacy. But when men are not being groomed
or
socialized to do that emotional work, and then women are, it just puts you in this awkward position where you're almost like the mother. I don't want to be anyone's mother, unless it's a child that I birthed or adopted.
I remember having this conversation with a married couple, and I said to them, at least the women that I know are very successful women, and they know what they want. And we're no longer in the day and age where some of these women are worried about what they're going to eat, the house they're going to live in. They can do all of those things for themselves. They just want a real partnership.
Right.
And so if they're coming across some of these, men, and I'm not saying all men, they still have these traditional ways of thinking about relationships. The woman doesn't need you to provide for her. The woman doesn't need to even buy her a house. The woman just needs you to be emotionally attuned.
To be a friend.
Yeah. Then it makes it difficult to have a relationship, because that's not what we need from men anymore. Right. And I'm sure it must be difficult for them too, because that's not what we need from men anymore. But the skill set that they've been raised with and they've been given is no longer as effective in 2019.
They have been ill prepared for, modern day dating.
Do you think that your success is an intimidating factor in dating?
Oh, yeah. I've had men tell me that I'm arrogant, I'm too opinionated, that I'm too aggressive, and I don't even think of myself as an aggressive person, because I don't even like conflict. I would walk in circles to avoid having any kind of confrontation with anyone. So for someone to call me aggressive, I'm like, really? Me? It's a mixed bag. Some men find it intimidating. Some men do not find it intimidating. And then you also have the men who are like, oh, great, she's successful. Now I don't have to do anything again, and they want to become a house husband. And, maybe that it wouldn't be a problem if they were, they had a trophy husband body, but half the time they don't have that either. Dating in your 30s as a single successful woman is something that you do have to factor into your dates as well, because you have to figure out if this person is trying to be with you because you're a meal ticket.
I can't even imagine.
Yeah.
So back to the idea of the messages that we send women or that we send little girls as we groom them. I feel like that message is about the idea that life is all about coupling. What do you think about that?
Oh my gosh. If you look at every Disney movie up until like the last few, like Frozen or Maleficent, they have always been about finding your prince,
Yes.
Prince Charming. He's a Snow White and he kisses you and you come to life because you've been laying dormant all of this time. Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, all of these stories, it's always about some man coming to rescue you. And I think it puts women in a position where they feel like they have to be damsel in distress all the time. Don't ever really want to fend for themselves, because if you fend for yourself and you're good at it, then now no one's going to come rescue you. And how are you going to find a husband? So we prep children from a very early age. Or I should say we prep girls from a very early age to think that their life starts when they find someone and, or when someone comes to rescue them. And that's when their life starts.
I think about this book, The Little Mermaid, that we read to our daughter, who is 6 years old. And she loves that story. And for the longest time, I would read that book and it wasn't a big deal. But one day, it literally hit me that in this story, this girl had to lose her voice.
Very dark.
Just to get a prince. And I was like, what am I reading? Like what am I reading to my daughter? Like how I am participating in grooming her to the idea. And I'm sure some people are going to listen to this and go, man, you just went too far with the whole Little Mermaid thing. But it literally, these things are subliminal messages,
they
I
are.
feel, right?
I mean, and I'm not saying, we're not saying that Disney created these movies to like subliminally groom girls for these situations. But I think that, just as an evolution of society, that was the norm. Like back then, it was socially acceptable. But in today's world, I mean, you take that story, for example, The Little Mermaid, she loses her voice, which, metaphorically speaking, can be compared to like a woman in an abusive relationship who loses her voice in that relationship. Yes. And then not only that, she trades her voice for a status, to allow her to be physically appealing to someone that she was interested in.
Do you believe that there's a right person for you out there? Or do you believe that whole idea is a setup?
Oh man, it's a setup. First of all, I don't believe that there's one single person out there. If you really think about it, like if at birth, like there's one person out there for you, what happens if like the person that was out there for you dies before you meet them? Does that just mean like you're destined for a life of, singleness or loneliness? So I don't believe that there's any one person out there for you. I think that there's a wide variety of people out there for you. But I think also the flip side is there's no guarantee that there's a person out there for you. There's no guarantee that you will meet a person that works for you, because I think at the end of the day, it's not like there's people who are slated for other people. I think it's that, chance opportunities put you in contact with someone who fits well with you, and you build on that, and it becomes a relationship, it becomes a marriage, and you guys, stay together. And in some cases, you end up apart too. They were in your life for a time being, and, it was fantastic when it was, and then it wasn't, So I don't subscribe to the idea that there's one person out there for you.
I agree with you. I also think it's a setup. But I think I also sound dark when I say things like that, because we all want to believe in the idea that, oh, you're going to get married. And I think I shared this with you. Like, I have said this to someone before, that I cannot really tell you that you're going to meet the man of your dreams, that you're going to get married. Right. So go ahead and live your life and do whatever it is that you want to do.
Absolutely.
I also think that as a married woman, and also because maybe I'm also a therapist and I do a lot of couples counseling, that sometimes single women look to me to give them some information, because like I'm married, I have this secret sauce. And I think maybe because of the, quote unquote privilege that, married women have in the society, we portray ourselves maybe as if like we have this special sauce made us snatch these men.
Give me the expo. I'll give you the single girls version. Earlier, I was saying how like all of my friends were falling like flies into this married pool, and I would look around and be like, well, what's wrong with me? Why am I not getting that? And obviously, like, not what I really believe, but it was a way that I just kind of like, what I rationalized it in my head was, well, it feels like everyone, like when we were in college, everyone went to this one class And I just happened to have skipped class. And this one class they went to, they got the expo. How to get a man 101, how to
snatch a man,
how to snatch, how to get that MRS degree, and everyone got the secret sauce there. You go out there, you look at this guy. If he's the one, he's gonna have a twinkle in his eyes. You lock eyes with him, and then you lock lips with him, and then you guys get married, have babies, blah 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 blah. And sometimes it could feel that way as a single person, because you're like, what the heck am I doing? Why is it that everything I'm working on, or all the things I'm trying, why isn't it working out? And these people were able to do it. So if you want to become a doctor, you go ask a doctor and you say, hey, what'd you do to get here? Tell me the real you know. And I think it's kind of just the same mindset as when you're single and you see your married friends, especially if they're in happy, stable relationships. You look to them and you say, okay, well, tell me how you did it, because I'm not having much luck. I mean, and sometimes after some of the harrowing dating experiences, you really go back to the drawing board and say, okay, I must be doing something wrong. What am I doing wrong? So let me ask someone who has done this before. Yeah. Maybe they have some insights that, I wasn't aware of. Yeah.
Well, thank you for putting my crazy thoughts and letting me know that it's not totally crazy. That, can I just say, from the League of Married Women, I'm making myself represent them, that there is no special sauce. It's just complete luck. And I don't think that if I had not married my husband when I did, that I would be married right now. Not the person that I am in my 30s.
I believe you, because, a lot of my closest friends got married early in the 20s, and we talk about my single status, and we talk about my dating experiences, and they tell me all the time, they're like, listen, it was just sheer luck I met my husband.
Yes.
It always sounds like, when I talk to people, it's these chance encounters.
Yes.
And so in a way that kind of puts my mind at ease too.
How does a single woman manage loneliness?
You really got to find hobbies. If you don't find hobbies, you will drive yourself insane, because the thoughts will trap themselves in your head, and it becomes an echo chamber, and you start repeating things to yourself that don't make sense. So I've had to find hobbies. I've recently gotten into yoga, and I really enjoy yoga now. It also gives me coping mechanisms for dealing with anxiety that sometimes comes with loneliness and with, worrying about things. So definitely find hobbies. Surround yourself with uplifting girlfriends, whether they're single or married, because you want people who can reaffirm you whenever you're starting to feel those self-doubts about your identity.
You know what? I would love to interview someone who is single and maybe in their 60s or in their 50s to hear their thought processes around this, whether or not it's even evolved in a different way, and whether or not they were able to have children or unable to have children, and how that comes to play.
That would be a really good perspective to get.
Yes.
Yeah.
What would you tell your younger self?
Oh, man. You're going to make me start speaking Yoruba here. So I would say to my younger self, my friend wahala. Don't worry yourself. I spent so much time in my mid to late 20s being worried and being obsessive about my status as a single person. Now, 34 going on 35, I've been able to take stock of some of the relationships I've been in and the men I've dated or been in serious relationships with. And I find that at different points in some of those relationships, I was editing myself to be a version that was more appealing to that person, because I felt that would make them stick with me. It's one thing to work on yourself to improve yourself. It's one thing to change who you are to appeal to someone else. And looking back now, I kind of wish that I had not done that to myself, because that was just an unnecessary burden that I took upon myself. So I would tell my younger self, just have a lot of fun. Yeah. Don't worry, because whatever's going to be will be, and no amount of worrying that you put into it will influence the outcome of life.
Wow. Thank you so much, Kanyin. Thank you all for joining. Share this show with your friends. Subscribe. Follow me on Facebook at Jumi Olubuyide Counseling and Therapy, and on Instagram on Jumi Olubuyide, the therapist. Let me know what you think about today's topic. And if there are other topics that you want to hear about, you can also email me at jumiolubuyide.com. That is it for today. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you for listening, and see you next time.